Welcome to another segment of Beyond the Grassy Knoll. You folks might remember, certainly in the most recent time, that we did the Knollapalooza, about 13 hours of programming, and we had on actually 3 guests, not all together, but it was the Noblets who spoke to ritual abuse, and I think they had acted as editors for a book in which there were a number of authors who contributed, and one of them was Ellen Lachter, who you've heard on the show several times before, but Ellen was there as well. We're going to have with us today someone else who was a contributor, unfortunately because the individual was a victim, and not just somebody who, like Ellen, and I'm not just minimizing that, deals with individuals as much as the case with our guest today. This person actually was involved with it and was a victim. And without delaying any further, we want to welcome Trish Fotheringham to the program. And Trish, thanks a lot for coming on to speak to what we always call a pretty, best kept and dirty little secret in our cultures.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Now, you also, as I said, you have a contribution to that book, do you not?
Yes, I do. I wrote chapter 24. It's called Patterns in Mind Control, a first-person account. Okay.
And do you have at least a short title for that book that they put out?
The Ritual Abuse in the 21st Century, Psychological, Forensic, Social, and Political Considerations.
Well, you had the long title, didn't you?
So, okay. It seems to make sense.
Sure. Now, I guess it may be tried to say, but it's certainly, I think, applicable here that the best place to start is at the start. So how did this all happen to you? And what is it that did happen to you, if you can share with us that?
Okay, basically I was born into it from birth. My mother was part of a kind of healing magic matriarchal cult, and they had a few weird little rituals. Things like, test for your power with water dunking at 6 months, that kind of strange stuff. And my dad was in a kind of patriarchal family clan that sort of had Druidic style practices and some odd weird rituals too. And then through my stepfather, or my dad's stepfather, my mother was connected with what I understood at the time was a military group. I don't know if it actually was. And basically I was enrolled in a mind controlling program, a mind control training program as a demonstration model so that they could demonstrate just how thoroughly they could split the human mind into controllable little pieces that they could be slaves and do what they're told.
All right, let me ask you this to clarify. First of all, the military involvement may have been in what? In backing this group to see what would happen?
Yes, I believe it was, all the people involved wore Canadian military uniforms, but I think they might have been doing stuff on their own time. And, but it was definitely that they were, looking at, controllable slaves, and I was a model of how that could be done.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to clarify, but you've already done that, we've had people on to speak to military involvement in the States, but in fact, this took place in Canada.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Go ahead.
Okay, so with that mind control training, they knew that at some point that would all break down. And then when that occurred, when I was no longer useful to them, there was all kinds of reprogramming and shutting me down and making me basically what I call discarded, making me into a guaranteed failure with no credibility kind of thing. That was in my teens, that part happened. And in with all of this stuff, off and on over the years, there was medical experiments with things like the effects on the human body of microwaves and electrical currents, and on testing stuff about out-of-body experiences too. My handler, pardon?
All right, let me just take you back so we can categorize this.
Mm-hmm.
From obviously before your memory, you had been subjected to, shall we say, cult-like practices?
From birth, because there was training. Some of the training started right at birth. The initial splits were done. The initial dissociative splits were done right at birth within minutes.
All right, and what took place say, during your grammar school years?
Grammar school years. There was a lot of training. I was trained as a sex slave. I was trained as a soldier. I was trained as an oracle, voice of the gods preacher. I was trained as some spy stuff, like being able to, pay attention and stuff, see things that others didn't notice. I was trained with some of that stuff. I was trained in with martial arts and weapons and stuff.
And so this was going on from the time you were, well, if we're talking about school, down here, grammar school, elementary school would be somewhere around kindergarten to 6th or 8th grade.
Actually, it started from birth, and each of the training paths, I was given basically 9 training paths that they wanted me to follow, that they were going to do. And the training for each path, each altar, all the altars in that path, started from birth and progressed, so that a lot of the stuff, like the sex slave stuff and the soldier stuff, my altar personalities didn't even understand it wasn't normal life. I was just being trained up to be a little soldier or a little sex toy or...
All right, so but you were cognizant this was taking place. It wasn't like they had created MPD and you didn't know what was going on, or
yeah. No, I didn't exactly know. Each altar only knew about themselves usually, and I didn't really. There was amnesic barriers trained in, so that I didn't remember the stuff until I was in my 30s in training.
Oh, so actually, while you were
in therapy.
So while you were going to school, as a somewhat, I guess, apparently, to at least those around you, a reasonably adjusted child, that was anything but that was anything but the truth.
Yes.
Now, was this something that was going on? While children were going home to participate in sports or clubs or just go home and do homework, were you being diverted somewhere else where this took place? Sometimes. More of it was at night and in the evening, though. But sometimes, there was sometimes things like I had to, neighbors would be brought in and I'd have to do a little striptease for them after school and go have sex with them or something. All right. And was there at any point as you developed where you started to sense, if you really couldn't nail it down, were you sensing something was wrong ever at any of this during this time?
I kind of...
Let me ask you this.
I was different. I knew I was different. And at 9 years old, at one point when all of this had made my physical body start showing disabilities, and I was in and out of the hospital a lot, it started to leak out when I'd be under, very sick and lack of oxygen or under the medications, and I'd start telling what was happening, and then they labeled that crazy talk and did a whole bunch of programming around it.
And I should be a little more specific, too, because I'm wondering, even if in a psychological sense, you may have felt something wasn't quite right, physically, did you pop up with anything where you said, gee, that's interesting, where did that come from?
The only real incident I remember of that was when I was 10 years old, and I'd been in the hospital, and I had been in the hospital for a number of weeks and with my asthma, and the staff said that I couldn't go home. I had to go to a local institution for children that were very sick, and I had to go and stay there. And my response was, oh, good, I can get away from my parents. And I never understood what that was about until I was in therapy in my 30s. And finally it made sense.
So you had some kind of subconscious understanding that you didn't like being around them.
Yeah, I think some of the altars knew that they weren't good. But it was all disconnected, and I'd always been fragmented and disconnected, so I didn't know there was any other way to be.
Now, of course, I don't know the way this works as far as the petitioning of one's mind, but is there any such thing as one of those personalities, which might be more dominant, starting to, for lack of better words, spill over into another persona, or even the persona you have as Tricia?
Yeah, they did sometimes. And I wasn't set up to have just one altar at a time. They set me up to have a combination of 4 at any given time functioning. So it made me look normal, but I felt very disconnected. But some parts were more aware. I had one altar that actually was self-created when I was 6 that we created her like Nancy Drew, the detective in the kids' book.
You're right. Uh-huh.
And she kind of hovered around everywhere collecting all the information she could about everything. But there was only very limited circumstances where she could actually come out and do anything about it or let us know anything. It's very how to explain it. Some altars that were out of body altars were more aware. Emotions could leak through, or strange ideas that didn't make sense to the part that was having them that were leaking through from other parts. But it really, it really wasn't evident to me until I was in my 30s and started therapy.
Now you refer to these other, well, you let's just call them altars, okay? Mm-hmm. That's the term you use. Am I to understand that also as what that would also be considered multiple personality? Yes. At the point when it was as many altars as I ended up with, it was about 150 of them. And from the people I know, that was a very small number based on what I went through. And it's because the training was done in such a way to make character development. And theater was a big part of my family's background and part of what went on. So much of this was tricks and theater and stuff, that somehow some of my altars, or one of them or something, came to an understanding of creating a character that can be developed instead of just every incident creating a fragment. Right.
So I had altars that took a range of things instead of just one thing.
What was the benefit to your parents for giving you over to something like this?
I believe the way I understand it is that my dad didn't actually know about it at first. Where I believe my understanding is that my dad's stepfather and my mother were the ones that did this. And it was during the Cold War times, and I actually believe my mother thought she was doing something good, because the way I understand it is that she was supposed to get social status, and I was supposed to get higher education and much more opportunities in life than I would have otherwise.
All right, now, was this training, as you've referred to it, was that done before them, or was that done someplace? Whereas, so that they just allowed you to be taken away, or were they involved with it firsthand?
Some of it, there was a variety. Some of it, they trained me, like, when I was little. Right off the bat, they were training me in ways. Mom generally took me and dropped me off for the things that were the mind control training parts. But I don't think she really knew what happened in a lot of it. I think she just had trust and faith and dissociated from whatever might be going on.
All right. Now, did you find that did you ever get a chance to find this out, since obviously while it was going on, you couldn't have possibly known if others were involved, but did you ever find out whether there was a number, whatever that might be, 3, 5, 7, 8, number of children that were involved with this as well at the same time?
At the same time as me. I can't say exactly who, no. I have memories of faces and memories of children, but their names weren't necessarily the right ones when they were given to me.
But, I mean, I'm wondering about how this is taking place as you're speaking, and for some reason I thought of you being involved with perhaps a handful who were going through that particular training. Was that the case, or was it all one?
No, mostly, for the mind control training, mostly it was a group of us. And I think it started out big and shrank over the years as kids were proved not to be worthwhile or went off into separate trainings. But I know at the age of 3, when I used to go to what I understood to be called manners training, which was sex toy training, there was a big room that a bunch of us would be in, a bunch of little boys and girls, and we were basically it was like sitting at school desks almost and watching films and being taught on how to be sex toys. And it was all about proper manners. We thought we were getting some special good training.
Oh, jeez. Now, I'm only going to ask you this one question because I don't want to delve into this, but I have to wonder if this were a problem for you. If you were forced to become sexually active before it would be normal for a female, did that interfere with any of your biological functions? And was that an issue as you were growing up?
Oh, I don't know. I never thought. I was very late getting my period and getting boobs, but I don't know if that had anything
that more
to
or
do
less
with
covers
that.
it.
Pardon me?
That more or less covers it.
But I do know that it started so early. I did not understand it to be abuse.
Okay.
It was done in a most of it when I was young, up until about the age of 6 or 7. Anyways, most of the sexual abuse was done in a very loving, playful manner that I actually interpreted as love and not abuse.
All right, so you didn't necessarily feel any pain from something that shouldn't have been happening at that age.
Yeah, I did. No, I didn't, because mostly, anyways, the bits that were pain were dissociated.
Okay. Now, at a time, when was the time that you said that you were of no use any longer?
Around the age of 10, I started to become unmanageable. They started to do some shutdown of some of the training then. At 12, they were really starting to seriously shut down things like the soldiers and military martial arts stuff. And then through my teens, they were training me, taking all the programming and redoing it in a way that made me understand that to be a good girl meant to be a whore on the street, or to be a good boy, a tough soldier meant to be in a gang hanging out with bikers or something.
Well, when you said you became increasingly more unmanageable, how could that be? I mean, I'm not questioning it, but what were your alters starting to act up, or was this you coming through? I mean, the core you.
Well, the core me was alters. I was split so soon after birth. There was never really anything but alters. But yeah, it was basically that different part, that the amnesic barriers between them were starting to sort of not function properly, so that I would randomly talk out or use the training in a way that wasn't allowed, and do some good in the world, or I'm a bit of a rebel at heart, and I tend to talk a lot. And the more they tried to make me stop talking, the more I talked.
So, but that, in a way, wasn't that a core trait of the personality that you really were, that was manifesting itself in your alters?
It's a core trait of the wholeness of me, yes.
Okay. That's interesting that would, I guess as you got older, and of course I'm guessing you probably know, but that there is still some self of you that was starting to emerge and was somewhat, I guess, of a powerful entity, I guess I would say.
Excuse me. I believe that the way I understand it is that it's the soul level inability to cope with all of this anymore. That was what was really at the core of it, and that my soul was screaming and it was disrupting the programming.
Did you ever find out whether or not that was also happening with other children? Or was this something that was just kind of specific and unique to you?
This stuff that when I was going through that, I did not know anyone else going through that. But in recent years, in the last decade or so, I've been in contact with a number of different survivors, and I believe it's a lot more common than people think. I think that there is a set amount of training. Like if they're into child porn or child sex slaves, when you hit 12 or puberty and your body changes, you're no longer going to be what they want you to be. And so they sort of have plans to discard people that aren't going to be useful to them anymore.
All right. That's hard for people to have to listen to, and maybe even to believe that as you become obviously an adolescent and adult woman, that would necessarily make you less desirable. But are we looking at people who obviously get involved with pedophilia?
Oh yes, very much so. I mean, there was very much the child sex slave trafficking. I had to train other kids when I was little, up until I was useless to them, up until the age of 12. And there's very much the child porn and the whole use of children is quite prevalent, I believe, in certain groups of people and kinds of kinds of groups. I don't know another word to put it.
Okay. But now, we'd understand also that this became somewhat of a commercial enterprise. Is that true?
Well, I believe that they were the reason they were making me a demonstration model. My understanding is, based on my memories, is that it was actually so that they could show what they could do, so they could sell the training.
They could sell the training.
Yeah, so we can train you up a little sex slave, or we can train you up a little soldier that doesn't even know when they do that, I was, at one point when I was 10, I was in a cage, and they were switching me from altar to altar to show all the different possibilities of the training. And it was in one of those big covered military tent type things with all people in military uniforms. And it was like they were bidding on the different trainings. Could
we assume, or do you know for a fact, did they actually make, when you speak about it in those terms, training films?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they did. I never really put it in those terms, but yeah, they were, yeah. Because, most everything was filmed. And they were marketing the training, but I think they were mostly marketing it that they would do the training and make the money.
Would you mind giving us a time frame from when this happened, year-wise?
When I was in the cage?
Well, when this all took place, I'm just trying to fix this.
I was born in late 1960.
Okay.
And so the stuff when I was 10 was like in 1970, 71.
The reason I say that is that we've had a guest on, Maury, who wrote a book called Reflections in the Night. I don't know if you're familiar with that book or with her, are you?
Actually, I've done as little reading of the material out there as possible because I really didn't want to taint my own stuff. I wanted to know what was mine.
Okay. Because, this is a situation where somebody was subject to this as well right after World War II. And the only reason why I asked you what your time frame might have been is to give us an idea of whether this was something that happened and was kind of like, excuse the word, chic in a way at a certain period, or whether this, obviously started or reared its head as far as, I'm sure this happened beforehand, but certainly became prevalent after World War II. And really has continued, and it has continued, hasn't it?
Oh, very much so. I have a friend that was born in 1941, and he grew up with it. And I have friends that are in their late 20s, and they've still grown up with it.
Do you?
And it's advanced. I can see by listening to them. I can hear how my buddy that's older than me, the training wasn't as successful, as clear, as absolute and definitive with him as it was with me. And then the people younger than me, it's even more clear and solid, and they've honed the methods.
And if I jump too far in time, you tell me and bring me back, because by all means, you know where you're going to go better than I. But what was the time about again where they figured you weren't of use anymore? And about what time and how did they necessarily, if you would, kick you to the curb?
Well, it started about 1971 when I was 10, and I used some of the Voice of the Gods training to do a protest march in that children's hospital I mentioned to get rules changed. And I wasn't supposed to be getting rules changed, doing things on behalf of me and other kids. And then that was sort of the last straw. And then they started training different altars with different things. So the ones that were like the Voice of the Gods, preacher, that kind of thing, they started getting trainings where I was sent to hell, burning hell, and others were suffering because of my words, and the world was burning because of me. The soldiers were put out into, at 12, out into training, supposedly final tests, survival tests out in the wilderness, in a military range around town here. And they were put on LSD and left in the woods to use their soldier training, and they thought they were in enemy hands, and got captured and beaten and tortured, and then they got accused of being traitors afterwards, and then as I got older, when I was 8, they just kept adding to the programming and altering it to make me more and more messed up. And then at 18, when I still hadn't been completely manageable, they did a whole long, many-month series of trainings where it was, what they told me was they were wiping my brain, and they made me believe through the TV beside me and different technologies that they used that were very funny now, but they seemed real at the time. And they had me believe that they were actually taking me back to birth, wiping my brain complete, and then rebuilding my brain with the memories that only the ones that I was allowed to have.
Well, let me ask you about this, and you may not know, this may not be anywhere near your expertise, but perhaps you do know. There is talk about having one's person's, shall we say, their personal hard drive wiped, okay?
Mm-hmm.
One, does that happen? Is it effective? And even if it is effective, can it be gotten and reached back through therapy?
I believe that probably today they probably do have the actual technology to do that much more truly than they did with me. But they made me believe through drugs, through hypnosis, through electrical currents, all kinds of stuff, that they were wiping my brain. And they played on the TV screen beside me all my memories, and maybe not all of them, but enough that I believed it was me on there and my memories going backwards, rewind. And it's kind of like when you got a hypnotic suggestion that you believe it.
Yep.
And so I understood. They took me right back into the womb. And then they grew me up through the ages and stages with just allowable memories. And I think it might have been more effective if they'd only done that kind of thing once. But over the years, they tried to reprogram me so many times and change the programming and shut it down and make it go away that it actually sent up red flags in my soul or altars or something so that it wasn't as efficient as it ought to have been, you know. And I do believe that even people that have had it happen much more effectively, that if you take the time to go into your memories and really listen to the overall content rather than just the specific details, that there's lots of hope for getting healed from it. Yeah.
All right. Now you said a couple of interesting things, so let me just take you back for you to comment specifically on them.
Okay.
You seem to indicate, if I got this right, that they did not have the technology necessarily then. So they almost, I think you may mention, had given you somewhat of a post-hypnotic suggestion, or at least faked that they were wiping your brain clean,
mm-hmm.
in the idea that you would believe that and therefore it would be efficacious. Is that correct?
That's what I understand it to be, yes.
All right, so even that in a sense was kind of it was a fakery. It was just that if they could get you to believe that, then I guess the job was done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, here's another thing, too. I mean, from what you've told us, the personality that you are, and I have no reason to believe you weren't, you seem like a very strong-willed person. Did that start to become a problem for them because you did have, obviously, a much more resilient, let's say, spirit than perhaps your average child?
Yeah, I believe I did, and I think some of it may have been the fact that I grew up with so many different kinds of things that like I had matriarchal and I had patriarchal and I had mind control with handler and trainer, and so it was like they each gave me different understandings of the way the world worked. And then my father gave me a couple of really important gifts in life, and one of them was that don't believe everything you hear and are told. Ask questions and make your own decisions. And I think that was quite an empowering thing to be told, repeatedly told.
The reason I asked you also about that time frame, not only because to try to get a fix on when this started, well, who knows how far back it really goes. I mean, it's arguable it's gone back to, the time of Moloch. I mean, it's an evil thing. But that it became perhaps more of an industry, shall we say, or of other usages. And the reason, again, like I said, I asked you about the time frame, is because it's widely reputed that there was a doctor, Sidney Gottlieb, I think I have that right, Gottlieb, excuse me, who was very much involved with this and seems to have left an imprint in many ways across the United States. Have you heard about Gottlieb at all? And certainly he would also be, I believe, a character.
The name sounds familiar, but names are challenging for me. That was one of the big programmings that I wasn't allowed to remember.
Well, Gottlieb, if I've gotten, I hope I have that first name right. It's just I'm pulling this out, but Gottlieb seems to have been an individual that I think he just passed not that long ago, who was involved in obviously creating multiple personality disorders. But this also is a throwback, and the reason I say it seems to be somewhat on the rise from World War II is because of what Mengele did in Germany, and although they said that he never made it out, apparently did make it to the Western Hemisphere and continued what he was doing. So that's why I asked you, because it seemed that there was something that Mengele had run with that finally was spread after the war. And so hence, post-World War II, it seemed to be a time when this kind of situation, this kind of training, this ritual abuse certainly was on the rise and became probably, Tricia, more clinical. You know, I mean, actually was on the drawing board and a viable thing to do with human beings for whatever purposes.
Oh, very much so. I believe, I'm certain that was true. I mean, from what I understand, brainwashing became a really, like the answer, the solution. And the concept during, after the Second World War, and it just progressed. And then when it was found that there was, like the Manchurian Candidate thing, where they found that this was brainwashing, and that was effective, and then it became let's aim for this, and it became a very profitable, viable, and clinical. Yeah, I think they were honing the steps over the years, honing the procedures.
Right, exactly. That's what I mean. I mean, they actually started building the perfect beast, more or less, through much more scientific and probably more efficacious methods. Probably you caught what might have been one of the last crude types of training that there was.
I kind of get that impression, because the people I know that are younger than me, it seems to have been very similar types of things that were done to me, very similar approaches to coping with things, to training things in and to discarding and stuff. And it seems to me that, I probably was one of the last experimental level.
All right, again, Trish, do you have a website where you post anything or a blog spot? Or is there any place that you...
No, I don't at this point, no. I have an email, and what was the rest of your question?
Oh, no. The thing was, and I think I know one of the answers to this, but at this point, we should talk about that. First of all, it is Trish Fotheringham. She is a victim of ritual abuse. She has contributed a chapter to the book Ritual Abuse in the 21st Century, and that was edited by the Noblets. You heard them on the show last July. Ellen Lachter was involved in that too, a name that's familiar to many of you if you've listened to the show across years. And obviously Trish's chapter is in there as well. But are there places you would have people go off the top of your head? And if not, we can always add this to the links that go with your show, your audio as well, where people can find out more about this, sites that you feel are reputable and will give people the real skinny on what goes on?
I would suggest going to Ellen Lachter's website, the www.endritualabuse.org.
That's right, okay.
And I think when I wrote it on that paper for you, I added an extra dot that's not supposed to be there.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
She has. It seems to me, quite a comprehensive list of links and books and things like that. And also in the Ritual Abuse in the 21st Century book, in Ellen's chapter 4, there's pages and pages and pages of book references in it too.
Yeah.
So that would be my recommendation, because I really don't know what's out there.
Well, there may be a lot of things out there, but we don't know how good they are. But at least we know that this is obviously a good website. And I'll say that Ellen has really built that up from the old days. It's become much more comprehensive, and she split off herself, I think, from being involved in another hosting service. So, and ritualabuse.org is that website that Trish is talking about.
Yeah, end ritual abuse.
But that's the Jersey in me. I don't speak like everyone else does. What did I say?
Well, you just said ritual abuse, and it's and ritual
right.
abuse.
And ritual abuse, and I have it, like I said, in front of me, so I should know better. And I'm just scrolling through her resources to see if she has any links in particular. Yeah, she does. So I just would say to folks, too, if you do go to endritualabuse.org, you'll find out that under links and other resources, there are other ones that I guess Ellen believes are good, and I don't think you'd have any problem with that, Trish, right?
No, I'd recommend anything that she recommends because she seems to me very discerning.
Yeah, I would say so, and she's been very generous with her time to come on to speak about this situation. Like we said, remains a very hidden and dirty secret in our societies and cultures. So, you talked about reprogramming, right? There were attempts to reprogram you.
Yes.
Okay, and what ages did that take place, and what did they expect necessarily to happen? Were they trying to do something new? Were they trying to end something old, or what?
Generally take something old and change it to something new, or put an end to it. For example, the ones that were Oracle and Voice of the Gods, they were using me for that purpose. And then when I wasn't turning out to say their words when I was supposed to and stuff, then they started training those parts to be afraid of their words and to not speak out and they would make other people suffer so that I wouldn't speak out. And then eventually they just literally sent these parts to live in hell, and they lived in hell until I found them in therapy.
Well, when you say this bit about Oracle/Voice of the Gods, what was that going to be about? Were you supposed to, or would somebody who was successfully trained, would they be used as some kind of child savant or some kind of mystic whose prophecies perhaps would be embraced?
That would be one very much so. Anything where you'd have someone who had a prophet or a mystic or an evangelist. A lot of the training was focused on rallying the crowds, rallying the people, and the mechanisms for doing that of what to say and how to rouse people's emotions and get them to do what you want them to do rather than what they want them to do, or whether they want to do.
I don't mean to digress. In other words, I'm going to, but I don't want it to go that far. But boy, I've got to ask you this, and it may not be in your purview to answer. What I would do is ask you if you felt qualified enough, and certainly from what you experienced and what you have studied later on. There is, I would call it a counterfeit movement. It may not have yet come to fruition. It may. Counterfeiting what the Bible might state about an exceptional group of young people in times to come. Could it be possible that certain select children, and this could be across the country, across the hemisphere, or across the world, could it be possible to train children, perhaps exceptional in their abilities in their regular self, to be something like what you've said that you were trained to do, and that is be an oracle, be somewhat supposedly hooked into God? Would you think that's possible? Would you rather pass on that, or?
Oh no, I'm quite sure that's possible. I'm quite sure it's already going on, and that many of them have grown up and are out there putting those kinds of messages out right now.
Well, I'm thinking in particular, and I'm going to be the one that mentions this, so this is not Tricia saying this. Unless she wants to speak to it, she doesn't have to. But some of this stuff I've been hearing about star children and indigo children, I'm starting to wonder about, and whether or not something is going on, but it's not from, shall we say, the Lord, but something quite different.
Okay, I would speak to that. I would say that I do believe the star children and the indigo children are advanced children. My apologies for the phone in the background. I have no control over that one.
That's okay. Okay.
I do believe that the star children and indigo children are actual highly evolved children being born into the world at this point, because critical mass has accrued and their brains are wired up more than ours were. Okay. But I also believe that those children and others are being used as tools.
Okay, and like I said, that's like 3 hour show in itself. But it obviously, from what you told me, it did give rise to me thinking about that. Now you talked about the reprogramming, so they actually try to update you more or less.
Yes, it's like, okay, we don't want you doing this anymore. This is the new rules. This is the new thing that you're supposed to focus on. And then it's an attempt partly to make the stuff that doesn't work go away or be locked away. And it's also just, evolution sometimes, like, you're not a little child anymore. You're not going to be, prime use for child pedophilia and porn. So then are we going to make you into a breeder now that you can have babies? That didn't happen to me. But are we going to make you into a high class whore that does spying for us? And so it's adjusting the plan as time goes by. Adjusting the programming.
Do you know? Let me frame this next question by saying that I had a guest on a number of years ago, and I won't name who that individual is. That individual also couldn't speak to certain things that individual did because it included murder. Now, let me ask you, do you know of any incidences where those like yourself were possibly used as assassins, not necessarily in the classic way, obviously, as we see most of them, but in some other ways? Was there anything that involved perhaps this kind of thing? And especially, as you well know, we can all see a scenario where a woman might be sent to seduce some kind of head of state or somebody who's important or a spy or whatever, and of course, through the seduction, snuff the target. Mm-hmm. Was that a possibility? Not for you necessarily.
Well, that was what one of my spy alter was sort of being trained for. But I think it was more for demonstration purposes than actual making me do that in the long term. But as I understand it, my brother was a trained assassin.
Your brother?
He told me that back in the 80s, and I didn't believe him. I didn't have my memories back then, and I thought he was crazy.
Would that have been in the classic Manchurian Candidate prototype with being one that's using firearms, or by any means necessary?
Actually, from what he said, I believe it wasn't actually that he didn't remember. He just had really twisted rationale for it and reasoning for it. He believed he was cleaning the streets and cleaning the city and cleaning the world.
Oh, so he might have been very aware of or somewhat aware of what he was doing. Yeah.
From what I understand, he was fully aware of it. When he talked to me about it in the summer of 1987, he was giving me details and things I couldn't believe at the time.
So in his case, it might have been that he was very ideologically driven and felt that he was performing a service. That's how the training works. Okay. Is they make your understandings fit what they want you to do. They make your beliefs fit. And so if you're supposed to be, say, a sex slave, the training is that's how you show love. That's how you make a man happy. That's how you make a woman happy. That's how you be worthwhile. That's how you be a good girl or a good boy. If you're a soldier, being trained for a soldier, you're trained to be cold and detached and do it, take orders, and depending on the level you're at, you might be trained to think for yourself in the process. But you are very much trained into the belief system that this use of force in these situations, these are the right ways to deal with things. What I'm going to jump to, and that is, at the time when you basically were released, if I'm missing anything, let me know. But if not, can you recreate the scenario where, like we said before, you got kicked to the curb? Okay, that was when I was 18. After a long, many months of a series of what I called the brain wipe, and then finalized with what was I called the joint lock, where they sealed it all in with two different altars. Supposedly, I don't know how they did it exactly, but smoking a marijuana joint across a fence in agreement that they would keep the secret, and another altar being wedded to the gate that locked it all away.
and strange stuff. And they did the brainwipe, they did the reprogramming, and the false life given to me of what I was supposed to remember had happened. And then when I had reached a point where I was so crazy with the different altars trying to make sense of things and trying to be good and trying to learn all this stuff, and our brains had been wiped and our trainings had been wiped and what was real and what wasn't, and the final pieces of the wedded to the gate and stuff had been happening, and then they just literally left me on the side of the road by the training place, and I went on and was confused and depressed and suicidal for a very long time.
Well,
it was just kind of like they just left me then afterwards, and the way I understand is that they did watch me. They have paid attention. They have tried to trigger me into proper behavior over the years, but that they learned that the more that they try and make me do what I'm told, the more that I don't. So they just left me. But the trainings at 18 were very much about other people suffering. If I didn't listen and anybody I loved would suffer if I didn't follow those rules.
Oh, so it's interesting. And I guess I often see this now, that the best way to get somebody in line is not necessarily to threaten their own life, but to threaten the lives of those who they love.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If you grow up with torture, you get pretty used to it. And you have to do an awful lot of nasty stuff before it really becomes something that is worth selling your soul for. But if you have ever watched someone you love suffer, you know how hard and painful that is. And to know that anything you do will cause people you care about to be hurt, to suffer, that has a great deterrent.
Have you? Can you say whether or not the last time you know that you were contacted?
The last time I know for sure that I was contacted was when I was first remembering the stuff about the joint lock back in the late 90s, and they had my therapist's office bugged, and I came out to catch the bus, and I was waiting at the bus stop, and this man, it was just like out of the movies. He was dressed in black, and he was saying all the trigger code words, and telling me all these things, and I had undone enough that all I could do was laugh at what he was saying and say, and just sort of come back with, yeah, and if that happens, well, then that happens, kinds of. It was just very strange and bizarre. And I got home, and I was like, what was that about? That was very strange. And then a little while later, I realized, I just got a visit from a contact from a man in black, like in the movies. It was absurd.
Do you have a family?
Yeah, well, I have a family. My brother, my mother, couple of half sisters, nieces and nephews and stuff. Most of them I'm in no contact with, and I have a son that's grown up now.
Okay. Apparently, even though you're speaking, and I think I know why this is, but I would rather have you say so. You're speaking out, and that could be dangerous, and yet nothing's being attempted upon you or those you love. Is that because they feel that nobody's really paying attention to this, and that mainstream news or whatever would turn around and just immediately demonize you or anybody else that would say this?
I think they probably have that belief to some extent, but I think they've also learned that stay the heck away from me because you're just going to make me do more harm to you. And if they do any damage to me or mine at this point, it just makes everything I have to say far more credible.
Well, then I would seem that their hope is just leave it alone.
Yeah, yeah.
And, people like yourself are not made martyrs. Hopefully, mass America, or in this case Canada as well, will just ignore this whole thing as being, the province of spy movies.
I think that might be some of it, but I think it's also that within the framework of the rules that I was given, I'm not supposed to say names, tell who did it, give specific details of that sort, and I haven't done that. What I've done is I've talked about my experiences, my understandings, how I heal, how things are done, but I haven't actually stepped out of the rules of the agreement.
So in other words, you didn't identify anybody specifically, and because
not by name,
right? You just talk about the process and just what you're talking about right here.
The only ones I've really identified by name are my own family.
Okay. Again, now, are you in a position now where you can say you've been thoroughly healed? Is that a situation that never happens? What is the part of therapy? Does it have to last forever, or how does that all work now, Tricia?
Well, I'm not multiple anymore. It's almost 2 years. I've been one whole person for the first time. It never was before.
Okay.
I spent 17 years in therapy every week, and at some point I reached the point where the therapy process of standard psychotherapy and EMDR and different things like that weren't really helping me anymore. I had reached the limits of what that could do for me. And I've taken to more spiritual kinds of focus on my healing at this point, and healing my self-esteem and healing my place in the world, that kind of thing. I don't think the healing ever completely ends, but you stop needing to fix yourself, and it's more about getting on with life and being functional and just dealing with things that impede or affect your life in ways I don't want anymore.
How long was it after you were, quote, discarded that you started to realize something went on? And boy, that must have been some kind of epiphany, if you will, when you realized, wow, something's going on inside of me, and I have to find out what that is.
Oh, it was a heck of a shock. I was 30 years old or 29 years old, and I went off to college, social work college, and learning to be a social worker. And we got the day that we just a few weeks into the program, we got a day where the whole focus was on all the different types of abuse and what they are, and how you recognize them. And I just was completely unglued by that and had to go to my instructor in tears. Help! I'm abusing my child. Everything I know is abuse. My whole life is abuse. And then he sent me to a therapist, and the first thing she did was, my biggest concern at the time was doing right for my son. And this therapist was a parenting therapist, and the first thing she asked me was, how were you parented? What did your parents do when you got in trouble? And I said, well, Dad counted to 10. And she said, what happened when he got to 10? I don't know. I never let him get there because his hand was bigger than my butt. And she says, how do you know that? And I go, I don't know. And we remembered most of my daily life, every house we lived in, most of my friends, but I didn't remember being disciplined. I didn't remember my own bedrooms. Certain things were very significantly blank.
Missing, yeah.
And that was the first inkling of anything. And then just trying to get through the rest of that college year was, my brain was, all the walls were starting to crumble. And within a few months after that, like it was a year-long course, and within a few months after that, I was in therapy, and we were finding the altars because they were just speaking out.
Did you have any professors, instructors, or even perhaps a friend in school that could act as a touchstone, somebody you could share with?
I've been very blessed, and I think it's my nature to talk to people, and so I was always able to have someone to share with, to talk with. And actually, in the first few years of therapy, I told everyone, and traumatized all kinds of people because I didn't know the content was so hard for them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, in that situation with the healing that took place, was there anything such as self-loathing or whatever that had to be stopped? Did you hate yourself? Were you ashamed for yourself, or was that not an issue?
Oh, yeah, that was always an issue. It's still, even just before this interview today, I was having a panic attack that I don't have anything of value to say. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just like so the doubt and the fear still come in that I'm going to say the wrong thing and hurt somebody, or and the self-loathing, self-hate. That one kind of ties in with any kind of having harmed anyone else. It's really hard to completely rid yourself of that self-hate, self-disgust.
Well, so you're saying that there's a feeling of guilt, not knowing if you might have harmed somebody. Of course, you're never going to know, so you're going to have to, I guess, quote, get over that. But I mean, and I'm not saying that in a crass way. It's just that that's something you have to surmount because there's no way you're ever going to be able to know.
Yes.
And even
yes.
if
I know I hurt people when I was young. I know I hurt people before this, but I can't know if this is going to hurt anybody, what I'm talking right now. But I have to have a faith that everything that has happened to me led me to here to be the person saying these things, and I'm doing my best to have integrity in it and make sure to claim it as my experience, not necessarily others.
They always say this is hardest, and I kind of believe it's true, but is there a point where you have to come to some kind of self-forgiveness?
Yes. Oh, yes. You have to forgive yourself. I'm still learning. That's still one that I'm working on, is forgiving myself for the choices I made when they weren't really choices when I was little. I mean, none of that was choice when I was a child, but it was set up often to look like a choice. And that the choices I made as an adult were based on the best I could manage at the time, and that I have improved that best, and that my choices are wiser and healthier now, and therefore forgive myself. I'm human. I'm not superhuman. I'm not perfect. Nobody is.
Well, no, without a doubt. But I'm also wondering too, is there also something you have to do with the forgiveness process, however that works out? And that may not be the best word, but for those who, quote, did that to you.
Oh, very much so. For me, it's an integral part of it all. If I am a product of what my experiences were and what I came to understand and believe about myself and the world, that's just as true for everyone else. And everybody that hurt me went through their experiences that taught them that was the way to be. And they are doing the best they know how within the framework of their understanding the way the world works. And they, in a lot of ways, are at least as, well, I mean, they had to have been victims to start out, or they would not have learned to do those things. And in a lot of ways, if they're still in the perpetration of that kind of stuff, they're still far more victim than I am. Because they're still victim of beliefs that their soul can't be happy with, that their soul must be screaming about. They're still victim of beliefs that are having them add fuel to the fire all the time about how bad they are.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, when you think about just what kind of value process or how anyone can what their possible view of the world could be like, and how they make that all right, or what happens to them. I mean, not that we're concerned about that, but you have to wonder, what is it about another human being that could behave in that capacity? That is unconscionable for most people, and I don't know what it's like for anyone else who's involved in that to go on. I just wonder sometimes, too, if there's a self-destruction mechanism in that people like yourself who were victims never get to see. Not that you would rejoice in that, but whether or not, there is a very... shall we say, fitting and nasty end to their existence.
Oh, there is, yes. And I mean, their souls are screaming about what they're doing, even if they can't hear it, feel it. They're not happy people. You don't go around hurting people and be happy.
No, exactly. With what you went through, what you went through, how has that impacted the way that you look at the life you've had past that time and to the future? Does it make you more appreciative, or are you bitter, or are you somewhat concerned about the future, not only yours but the world's? I mean, what kind of glasses do you look at the world through because of what you did go through?
I think it changes daily sometimes, or hourly, depending on my emotional state and how tired I am. But generally, I'm a believer in past lives and evolution of the human spirit and soul through human experiences. And I believe that I came into this life to go through that hell, to learn the things that I've learned, so that somebody can say the things that I'm saying now. And oddly enough, that is very comforting for me. It makes everything that I went through have some value. And it's like it was my path from the start. And much of my life, I've been so focused on healing my physical body, my mental, emotional, spirit, etc. That's all I could focus on, was that and parenting. Whereas now I actually am so much improved in all forms of my health, and I have this apparently helpful message to give to the world. It's like now my future begins. I'm finished therapy, I'm one whole person, and now I get to really contribute in a positive way and find this thing called joy in life and wonderful new adventures and experiences and things that just were not even within my realm of conceiving before.
Do you feel you've gotten to a point where a lot of people who haven't gone through what you have never gotten to? And,
yeah.
And that is being able to take every individual on an individual basis and treat them just as you find them, and not deal with others in whatever kind of segment of life they may be in, regardless of race or creed or anything else. Can you actually take people just for themselves without having any kind of perceived attitudes towards them?
It's interesting. I can in some ways and not in other ways. When I look at people as a group, it's much easier to look at the positives and just sort of think of their soul, the child in them, that kind of thing. On an individual basis, one-on-one, or when I'm actually with people, I'm very much an open-hearted, connect to their soul. I get along with people that nobody else gets along with, and I bring out the good in people because of that. At the same time, as if I've still got some issues of my own that I haven't finished clearing up on it, like dealing with men that I might find attractive, oh my goodness, I have a lot of issues with that. And it twists me in knots, and I forget their soul in that process, and I color it with my past still.
Okay.
But that's just about the only area left that I do that.
Do you think you'll see a time when that will also fade away?
Oh, yes. I expect everything else has. This will, too.
Okay. I'm going to ask you real quick, if you don't mind, at least one question. We've gone over a little bit, and I thank you for staying a little overtime with us.
I'm enjoying this.
Well, again, I don't want to be sappy and say I hope there's something therapeutic in this for you, but I do hope there is, and certainly other people, and I'll tell you, some people have written me, especially after the Noblitz and Lachter were on, and said they wanted to listen, but they just had to walk away because they had some issues also. So, I mean, it's a very powerful thing, and some people have not come around to where you have, and I'm sure you can fully understand that, and you can only hope that somehow, some way, that they can find some peace and some surcease from all this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
I've noticed something that even a year ago, when I was talking about the book, people were still glazing over at just the first two words, ritual abuse. They glazed right over and disappeared. They couldn't hear it. And yet by the fall, by 3 months ago, all over the place, hairdressers and everybody wants to know about it. Well, so I think we've hit some critical mass of the world being a little more open-minded. At least I'm hoping so.
Well, yeah. But yet I have to follow. Well, I don't have to, but I am going to follow up with this question because I think this is. Well, it doesn't matter what I think. We down here in the States have the milk carton children. Do you know what I'm referring to? You have what? The milk carton children, we call them.
Oh, the ones that go missing, yes.
Well, do you believe? Do you know for a fact, or do you suspect that many of these children may have been given over, not necessarily by their families, who knows, through abductions or whatever, could be through the family. Do you believe that these children, and it seems to be a rise in the numbers that have been taking place in whatever amount of time, I wouldn't even know where to begin. Was it 10 years ago? Was it 20 years ago? Do you believe that there is a certain industry out there, or at least our children may be disappearing because of what you went through? I mean, that kind of practice?
I have no doubt about it. I was one of the ones that they were brought to train.
Could you clarify what you mean?
At 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, it wasn't just me being part of the child sex slave trafficking stuff. I was actually, my grandfather was bringing them on to the yacht that the big shots had, that they trained a lot of the children on, and the children when I was 10, 11, 12, the children were handed over to me for some of their initial trainings as sex slaves and stuff. And the way that I understand it is that kids are gathered from the East Coast, brought out to the West Coast, and shipped off to Asia. They're gathered from the West Coast taken to the East Coast and shipped off to Europe, and then it goes out same way over in Europe and Asia too.
So we truly do have a trade. We have an international trade, don't we?
We do, very
Yes.
much so.
Okay.
And there's also, in addition to the ones that are known about that go missing, there's a whole lot of children that are born and never registered. The world does not know they exist, and they are nothing but slaves and tools and animals, really,
right.
the way they're treated.
Just to follow up to that question, I had written this down as a note, and I'm not saying that all institutions are like this, but can we assume orphanages are sometimes fertile ground for these types that would take children away?
Well, either take them away, or, in my experience, a lot of the institutions of that sort and other, lots of kinds of institutions, if they're not taking them away, they're still making use of them there.
All right, we've been speaking with Trish Fotheringham, and that's with an O, but you'll know that when you see her name up with her audio on the homepage. Trish, do me a favor now. Tell us about the book, the name of the chapter you have there, and also you've got something else coming out, don't you, in the form of a DVD?
Yes. My chapter in that Ritual Abuse in the 21st Century my chapter is called Patterns in Mind Control, a first-person account. The ending epilogue to that, entitled The Moral of My Story, is online at Ellen Lachter's website, endritualabuse.org, under Healing and Psychotherapy. And also, Ellen came up in October and interviewed me, and we are almost finished. It'll be available soon on DVD, and it's entitled Healing from Ritual Abuse and Mind Control, Survivor Trish Fotheringham Speaks Out. And that is about 2.5 hours of her interviewing me on healing and some of the kinds of things you've been asking me about, too. Primarily focused on things like tips and ideas and suggestions for therapists, clergy, survivors.
Okay.
And it includes the moral of the story being read by me and some of my journal artwork that actually shows what my inner world looked like when I found it as it evolved and what it was like just before I ceased to be merciful.
Oh, boy. Oh, that must be something. Holy mackerel, yeah.
Yeah, it's about, well, I think we've got it down to 1 DVD now, but there for a while it was looking like it was going to be 3.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me with you two guys, but...
Ellen is thinking that she may well make this the first in a series with other survivors if she's able to.
Yeah, that would make sense. That would make sense. So I guess we can look for that DVD perhaps in the next few months? Yes.
Well, we're just finalizing the final draft, and then there's all the copying and packaging and stuff. But
right.
Yeah, and it'll be advertised on Ellen's website for sure, and she'll send out notification to anybody on her mailing list.
And I'd like to have Ellen come on too when that time is at hand to be able to promote that, and also we can catch up on what's taken place with her work since the last time she was on, which is now about 8 months. So, listen, Trish, I want to thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it. And let's see, how do you feel about email? Are you taking email?
I'm fine with email. It's rainbowtrish@myself.com.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And honestly, usually the people who contact you are those who are very, very sincere. So we don't usually have the general noise that comes with politics and other things. This is a whole different deal. So thanks
even
a lot.
if anybody phones with criticism and nasties, they're still doing what they sincerely believe.
Well, you do have a good attitude. All right, well, listen, Trish, thanks a lot, and perhaps we'll be able to do this again, but certainly I'll look for that with Ellen and see if we can pick up where you and I left off.
Thank you very much for having me on, and I'd love to come back on.
Okay, Trish, bye-bye now.